So good afternoon and welcome to the ABG Sundal Collier Investor Days here at Haymarket. My name is Rickard Anderkrans. I am a healthcare analyst at ABG Sundal Collier, and I'm very happy to present Biovica here today. I will be holding a short Q&A presentation afterwards, so I'll be asking some questions, but I will leave the word over to Anders Rylander, the CEO of Biovica. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Rickard. And hello, everyone. My name is Anders Rylander, and I am the CEO and also the largest shareholder of Biovica. My background is within management consulting and entrepreneurship. So 10 years ago, I came in contact with Biovica as an investor. And I had to ask myself this question, which I guess some of you are considering today as well. Why invest in Biovica? And for me, it was the great value potential that the company and its product can bring for the cancer patients in the world, and also for society that finances these treatments. And let me use this patient with metastatic breast cancer as an example. A patient with metastatic breast cancer has about 3 years in median survival. And during that course of time, she will go through a number of cancer treatments with severe side effects. And far from all treatments are effective, and far from all patients respond to these treatments. So if she can get a better treatment, the opportunity to live a long life and avoid unnecessary side effects will increase. And this is the area where Biovica is focused in to through our product, offer more personalized treatment within the cancer area for better outcome for the patients, and also a more cost-efficient treatment for society. And so that was the reason I invested once upon a time, and I think also there has been more than me that saw the value of this and identified this as an unmet need, especially some of the leading oncologists in the world who has confirmed that this is an unmet need we can fill. And also we've done a lot of collaborations together with them in clinical trials that has generated results and data that proves the performance and the value of the product. So that's definitely another reason for investing in Biovica. And then it's the commercial side. There's great potential also commercially. 6 billion Swedish kronor is for the first application of many potential applications. And we've chosen as metastatic breast cancer and monitoring of treatments within that area. We're also in a very exciting phase currently, as we are about 6 months from submitting our FDA submission in order to get approval, and then our sales within the clinical area can start at the biggest market in the US. So the reason for investing for me has been value for patient, value for society, and I'm also convinced that will lead to shareholder value in the end. And also, if you want to dig into this, I can recommend going to our homepage and look under Investors Relations and Analytics, where we have more details about the value potential of the company. And today I will go through these areas more in depth: the need for the product, our solution, the scientific evidence we have created in collaboration with some of the world-leading key opinion leaders and oncologists, the market, and our go-to-market plan. And to start with the need, as I was saying, today a very positive thing for the patients is the number of different treatment options that exist. That has improved survival for in this case, breast cancer patients. But it also creates a challenge, because with many treatment options, all patients doesn't respond to all treatments, and over time, patients develop resistance against the treatment. You need to identify that as early as possible so you can switch to an efficient treatment. And then, of course, the treatment costs and side effects. Cancer treatment within metastatic breast cancer can cost more than $10,000 per patient a month. So there's an economic aspect also to use the money wisely and the side effects are often severe. So in order to accept the side effect, you want efficiency from the treatment as well. And what Biovica can offer is a quicker way of getting feedback of the efficiency of the treatment compared to the methods that are being used today. And I'll come back to that later. And the way we do it is with our product called Divitum. Divitum stands for dividing tumor. And so that gives an indication of what we're doing. We are measuring the cell proliferation rate, as the doctor said, or cell division. And as you all know, cancer is defined as uncontrolled cell division. We can provide some very important information through our assay or our test. And the way we do it, we use a blood sample from the patient, and we get a measurement of how quickly the cancer grows, how aggressive that is, and also when a treatment is working the way it should of course reduce the growth rate. And we've implemented this product on a standard platform called an ELISA platform, so it will be easy to implement it in the different labs around the world. And the product is currently CE-marked and, of course, patented in a number of countries. So we have strong patent protection. The company behind this, Biovica, is based in Uppsala, and the product spans from research at Uppsala University, where we have our production facility, our R&D, and our lab. And it's all controlled and certified under the ISO processes within this area. And here's a schematic picture of how it works. The current method being used, the golden standard, so to speak, to evaluate treatment efficiency within this area is image diagnostics. You take a picture, an image of the tumor or tumors, if it's metastatic breast cancer, before treatment, and you take a new picture 3-4 months later, and you compare the size, and you draw a conclusion from that. What we do with Divitum is from a blood sample, we can measure the growth rate that will then become an increase in volume. So we get a prognostic measure, and we have in clinical trials shown that already after 2 weeks, we can see significant reduction from before and 2 weeks into a treatment within the breast cancer area. So a quicker and a simpler feedback on treatment efficiency. And these are an example of different diagnostic methods being used. Imaging, as I mentioned, being the gold standard currently. Another area is biopsies. When you take a sample of the tumor through a thin needle and you analyze that sample. And from that you can measure similar data as ours, proliferation, how fast the tumor growth is. But of course, with a needle, it's difficult to monitor the patient over time, and also if it's a metastatic cancer, this becomes a problem. So we offer a simpler solution compared to biopsies. And when it comes to blood-based markers, currently there are no really golden standard, no marker that has taken this area. So there's an opportunity for us to take that position. And here's some examples of blood-based markers being used, but has not established themselves as a golden standard, as I said. And also Ki-67, that's the name of the current biopsy biomarker that's used for measuring proliferation, not being used frequently in the metastatic setting for monitoring treatment efficiency. There are also thymidine kinase, the same enzyme that we are measuring, that has been used for several years. The one on the market is currently being used for blood malignancies. With the data that we are providing, we are creating a unique niche where there's also a demand for these kind of treatment follow-up. And maybe the most important piece of commercializing a product like this is to generate data with leading key opinion leader, in this case oncologists. That will be the foundation for the entire commercialization process. that will be used for regulatory approval, for reimbursement, and for generating demand for the product. So far, we have been able to publish results from 17 clinical trials together with oncologists in peer-reviewed journals that proves the value of the product. We've done that within several areas, within breast cancer, lung cancer, gastrointestinal, and also blood malignancies. In total, it's more than 2,500 patients, so we have a solid foundation. And if you summarize the results, we proven to be prognostic, that is before start of treatment. We can make a prognosis on the outcome for the patient, and monitoring, that is during treatment, giving early feedback on how effective the treatment is. But our focus area is breast cancer, as I said, and so this slide summarizes the results within breast cancer. And as you can see, our focus has been within metastatic breast cancer. That's where we're working with our FDA submission and will enter the market. And that is where you have the problem of following the patient over time, monitoring the treatment effects. And within the breast cancer area, we now have performed more than 10 trials, most of them in the metastatic setting, but we also have in earlier phase. And just recently, we presented news regarding our second trial within local cancer. That is when you have diagnosed the patient with cancer, it's also important to understand the risk in order to make decisions about how aggressive treatment you put the patient on. So that's another opportunity for the future, but first we're focused on the metastatic setting. And as you see, some of these collaboration parties are some of the leading ones within this business. One can mention, for instance, in the US, Johns Hopkins, which is one of the more famous and well-recognized institutes in the US with almost 30 Nobel Prizes. The SWOG research group, which has a fantastic trial with over 400 patients, that will be the basis for our FDA application. We also have collaborations in Europe. We started out with the Karolinska. We're now in our third trial together with the Karolinska Institute, but we also are working with two groups that spans all over Europe, ABGSC and BIG, which gives us a good reach also on the European market. And behind these trials and these institutes are the key opinion leaders. These are the leading oncologists that sits on top of these different organizations that publishes guidelines, which is so important for us to get included into. One can mention a few, maybe Dan Hayes being the former ex-president of ASCO, which is the world's greatest cancer conference, but also publishes guidelines for treatment within breast cancer. Together with him and his colleagues at the SWOG team, we're doing this SWOG trial, which I refer to, which will be the basis for our FDA approval. Matthew Götz is another example, works at the Mayo Clinic, also involved in both the guideline, have been writing guidelines for ASCO and for NCCN within breast cancer, our focus area. So that's, and we have similar examples on the European side, both with European oncologists like Angela De Leo, who is on the executive committees of both IBCSG, which and the big breast cancer group, which I mentioned, and also ESMO being the and overall covering all cancer areas, not only breast cancer. In Sweden, we work with Jonas Berg, the former chairman of the Swedish breast cancer oncology group. So reaching out to these oncologists that can give even further impact with the results that we get together, and which will be the keynote speakers on the conferences. Generating demand for the product is really important to us. Talking about the market, if you look at it as this cube, our focus area is the combination of breast cancer, metastatic in US and Europe. That combination, that corner, is about 450,000 patients. That is about 1% of all people living with cancer today, based on the Global Can statistic that was presented a year ago. So there is a lot of potential to grow. The way we've estimated this is that we have done a market research on these markets. We've asked oncologists to confirm the demand for the product, which they did, and also around treatment schedule, how would they use it, what frequency, how often would they use the test. We also asked payers for price willingness, what would you could you accept to pay for this kind of product, and that ended up in the 6 billion per year figure. So it's based on market research. And that's the first. I talked earlier about our results within early breast cancer, so there's definitely an opportunity to expand to earlier phases. We also have results within lung cancer and gastrointestinal cancer being one of two of the larger areas, and of course geographic expansion. So in all dimensions, but we are focused in getting to the market in one specific area first, and then expand from there. We have the research market, where companies are using, primarily pharmaceutical companies are using it in clinical trials and in development of new drugs. So of course you're interested in getting feedback on efficiency already in that process. And the steps in order to get this to the market, to generate demand and sales. Of course, you have to develop a product, but when you develop a product, it's important that you already from the start have the FDA requirements in mind. So that's what we've been doing for a long time, and we have a version now which we will meet the requirements set out by the FDA. In parallel with that, we have documented the product in these clinical trials, and that will be used then in the next step, the regulatory pathway, where we put our focus and effort into the FDA track, because that's the one with the highest requirements and demand, and then we can reuse that data on other markets going forward. And but that's not enough. You need to get into the reimbursement systems so you get paid. So the clinical data that we generate will also be used for reimbursement. And the last step that we believe is important before entering the market is to establish a commercial partnership so we can benefit from an already existing sales channel to reach out to the patients on these key markets. And we're looking into both collaborations with labs, which will be our customers selling it to the different hospitals, but also diagnostics companies where we can complement their current assortment. Upcoming milestones to look out for is that we've said that we will submit our FDA application by mid next year, 2020. So we're in the middle of doing that work. We have we're in the first phase, which is called analytical validation, where you technically prove the performance of the product, and we've done 2/3 of that. So we already now see that we are meeting the requirements we've set up. And the next step is the clinical part of the FDA approval, the clinical validation, and we just received the samples from our collaboration partners. We now have them in-house and can soon start working on the clinical validation as well. After we submitted the FDA submission, we expect to get approval from the FDA before end of 2020. And then the next important step is to, during the next year, after that, during 2021, get the first reimbursement in US and then expand from that. So by early 2021, we have a product which can be sold out-of-pocket sale, and then later that year, a reimbursed product. So is there no risks in this project? Yeah, well, of course, there's still some risks, but we have been working proactively for many years to mitigate those risks, and the further we come, the more data we generate. We have reduced risks in many areas. Of course, product development, when we have a developed product and we have come quite far through validation, I would say that we've reduced that risk. Same thing with the clinical side, when we now have published a lot of of clinical trials with positive results, and we have key opinion leaders supporting the collaboration. Regulatory pathway, we have had numerous discussions with the FDA for several years, so we believe we have both educated the FDA and we've understood what they expect from us. Reimbursement, we've done market research and we've done a pre-study within this area, so we are working on that as well. And same thing with commercial partnering. Basically, that's dependent on having all the other pieces in place. Also like to mention board of directors. We have a really strong team with the board of directors. Lars Holmqvist, being the chairman, has a long experience within this business, being the CEO for Daco. That was a turnaround case, you could say, and then later was sold to Agilent. So that's a fantastic success story, and he has brings great experience from that. Maria Holmlund, also many years within Fadia, Thermo Fisher, and similar diagnostics company on the market side, bringing new products to the market. And Ulf Junelius, an example of, he has the pharmaceutical and oncology side, being an oncologist working for the pharmaceutical industry, developing several blockbuster drugs within oncology. So we have competence from the business that has done this before, which is a great support. So finally, to summarize it, I think we have a very interesting product that can add great value both to patients and payer. And we are in an interesting phase where we're in the middle of the clinical validation, and we have generated data that proves the value of the product, and we are about to submit our FDA application during next year. So that's a very significant milestone for us to get to the clinical and commercial market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anders. I'll proceed with some questions. So DiviTum has been CE marked for some years now. How has the sales in Europe progressed so far, and what's the strategy to sort of expand sales going forward?
We start with the sales. So far, our sales has been research sales. So it has been some of the major pharmaceutical companies that, based on our clinical results, have gotten interest and used that for the development of their own new cancer drugs. So we haven't really been using the CE marking. CE marking is one of many factors to generate sales. You need as I had in one slide, you need the reimbursement and you need a solid data from clinical trials to generate demand. That's what we're generating. And our initial focus area is US. So you can expect us to enter the market in US, develop out-of-pocket sale and reimbursement, and then Europe as a second priority. There's a reason for that as well, because we believe US is a bigger market, worth taking the investment, and you will enter the market on a higher price level. But Europe is second priority, and we have identified in our market research a couple of countries that will be our first tier.
So you recently announced you adjusted the timetable for the 510(k) FDA submission, which is now set for mid-2020. So you wanted to include the major...
the SWOG trial.
The SWOG trial, exactly.
Yeah, so we got an opportunity to base our application on that, which we now are basing the process and the time plan on. And that's a great opportunity. That's not that many trials of that available. It's retrospectively, so we can use old samples. So you can see you could gain 5 years compared if you could done it prospectively, and you don't have to pay for the enormous costs. So it's a great opportunity, and the SWOG network in itself, I think it comprises of over 12,000 oncologists and several hundred hospitals. So it's a great way also to reach out to them and being our first customers and so on. So yeah, we see that as an opportunity. Unfortunately, we get access to the samples now.
Just as a final question, so the first indication you will go for monitoring. So if you gain a 510(k) FDA sort of get through there, how difficult would it be to add a prognostic indication as well, where you using in a prognostic setting?
That's a good question. In this was done in discussion with the FDA. We concluded we will start with the monitoring claim, and because for several reasons we reduce risk, not doing everything at once. And the monitoring claim is the commercially most important for us because you follow the patient over time. To add, it could be the prognostic claim, as you mentioned. It could be other treatment. You could want to expand the intended use, and that would be a supplement process that would be much easier than the original that we're doing now, because you can reuse this. I'll talk briefly about analytical validation. We invested many hours and performed thousands of tests in several batches of the product to prove the performance. Once you've done that, it's done, and you can reuse that in your supplement. So yeah, it's easier. Of course, you need clinical data, of course, but with our collaborators and so on, I think that's an edge that we have that we could already now actually submit for prognostic claim if you wanted to. But in discussion with the FDA and also our commercial potential, this has been chosen to be the strategy.
So it's a slightly easier process then. So
we'll see. When it's risk reduction,
Yeah.
not doing everything at once and then fail on one thing, failing the entire project.
So I want to thank Anders, and thank you all for listening, and
Thank you.
have a good afternoon. Thank you.